You know that we're going to identify a ton of things that need to be improved. I'm sure I don't have to explain that to you. It's obvious. And then when I do 100% of what works and 0% of what doesn't work, I get a fabulous job offer, which meets all my key criteria. Done.
Perfect. Now, what if there is a family issue? If the adult siblings are at war, how can one of them use this skill to create, let's say, peace, even if they're the only one that knows this?
Well, when I created a rapprochement in my own family, my first cousins weren't thinking about doing it. They had given up decades earlier, like 4 decades earlier. And I didn't even know about these people until, like a week before I started the rapprochement, actually a couple of days before I started it. As soon as I heard about my cousin's existence in New York City, I started working on it, So it just takes one person. That's a very important part of this. But let's say I was telling myself a hopeless story too. My cousin Carol lives in New York City and I live in New York City, but we can never be friends. Is it true? Yes, no, or maybe. Well, I might have believed it was true because I'd never met her since I was 1 year old, so it might have been logical. What evidence do you have that that's true? Well, I haven't met her since I was 1 year old. My father and her father were brothers and best friends, and they hadn't spoken in the last 39 years. My mother refused to have anything to do with that whole branch of the family, didn't like them, didn't want anything to do with them. I'd never had anything to do with my cousin Carol. I didn't even know she existed until through a boyfriend looking to buy some art, we were connected to each other. And, and on it goes. How did I feel when I told myself the story? Well, I felt, really, really sad. I felt very sad because, the obvious, and I felt disappointed that my parents had never smoothed it over just so that I would benefit and my cousins would benefit. And I just felt hopeless about it. And how would I feel if I thought there was another way to turn the story around? Obviously, I'd feel excited and hopeful and again, energized. Yeah. And the turnaround was all I had to do, which is what I did, was pick up the phone and call her, say, my boyfriend Frederick said that he thinks you and I are first cousins. And I don't know if that's true, but my name is such and such. And my cousin Carol immediately said, oh my God! Come on, come right over, which I did. Amazing.
Oh, I love that
We
story.
became friends. We're still very dear friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So by
and you know what I just
action.
realized today, which I've told the story to you, told the story on air. Carol and I speak a bunch of times. I never realized my boyfriend who went to her art gallery, she used to be a co-owner of the art gallery at Macy's in New York, big art gallery. I never realized that Frederick actually bought the art from her that he was thinking of buying. And it would have been so easy for us to invite her out to the country house, which it never occurred to him to do, and it never occurred to me to do. That's so crazy.
Well, you made the connection.
I know, but I mean, here we are. We're 30 years later, right? 30 years later.
But she's not going to beat herself up over this.
No, it's just so crazy, If he were alive, I would make him go take pictures, of those pieces. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it just came to her. Thank you for sharing.
Not funny? That's so funny, these things you think about.
Oh, well, hey, how about this? Finally, let's talk about health crises that are so prevalent amongst seniors. And I know that you teach them to transform a health crisis. How can they actually use this skill to become healthier?
What I see with most people who are ill is that they feel hopeless about it and they don't even do anything to get well past the basics of picking a doctor that their health insurance pays for. And frankly, that is rarely enough. And then I enter the picture either as their coach or their friend, and I say, well, now wait a second. You know, I used to have this problem with my health and I don't anymore. And I know 5 people who used to have the problem you have and they don't anymore. And on it goes. So it's that pervasive hopelessness and acceptance. Acceptance is not your friend if you have a problem that's not fun. And all problems are not fun. So there's not a fun problem. So you don't want to be accepting. You want to be as accepting as you need to be while you're moving towards it. It's like you can't be sitting on an airplane or in a car or on a train or on a bus or in an Uber going, but at the same time, you don't want to spend 5 years flying to New York or Chicago. You know, it's got to be within a certain range. So this acceptance can be a problem. Don't get stuck in that. At the same time, don't get stuck in pervasive hopelessness. So what evidence do they have that it's hopeless? Usually the evidence doesn't hold up. It just means they haven't done enough research. They haven't found that extraordinary outside-the-box healthcare professional or energy worker. I happen to know a whole slew of them. Then how do they feel about it? Well, you know, hopeless, exhausted, despairing, miserable, whatever. How would they feel if they could learn that the story about their so-called hopeless illness isn't even true? They'd feel thrilled, they'd feel grateful, they'd feel, you know, relieved. And the turnaround is when you find the perfect healthcare professional or healthcare professionals that have the tools and skills you need, and you manage your mind so you don't allow yourself to go into sadness, you're well.
Beautiful. Well, you know, Susan, I can see that we have a really important clip to go
Good.
into
Let's do
on
it.
saving your life, and we'll be back for more. Well, so now I'm curious, how does whole brain function support us to have the longest and most healthy life, and what happens if we really don't have that full brain functioning?
Yes, this is really crucial because this is what I speak to almost every single client about when they first work with me. And I was explaining that to somebody just today, and I was explaining that to her boyfriend just last night, that every problem that they're describing in their family dynamic can be traced back to someone needing more whole brain function. So, Fred, if you would put that map up for just a moment, thank you so much. So if someone is missing some of the rational self, then they're not logically analyzing information and data and dollars and numbers, and they make perhaps some very poor choices about health or about legal situations or both, because they're not practical enough. They're not logical enough. If the person makes very poor choices in the green section, the safekeeping self, then they're just not being safe enough. They may be risky decisions that don't pay off, and some risky decisions you can't afford to have. Lower right, if people are missing that, then they're not caring about other people's feelings. They end up alone and not wanting to be alone. And upper right, if people are not enough of the experimental self, then as they get older, they don't have any peace. They don't learn to meditate. They don't learn to take it easy. And then they find themselves exhausted. So it always boils down to that. If you have whole brain function, or if you learn about whole brain function from me, and then you manually attend to it, it may not be natural, but that doesn't mean that even though it's not natural that I don't do it. I'm making sure that I'm hitting each of those 4 quadrants every day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. That's a lot of information that's so very valuable. Now, I'm curious, why is it so crucial to plan and envision the future long before we get there?
Well, we know people, you and I think everybody watching, you know people who are in their 80s and they're lost. Either they didn't figure out what it would be like if their spouse or partner died, or they didn't figure out what would happen if they didn't have a career that would sustain them irrespective of the vagaries of jobs and businesses and companies and the economy. Or they didn't take into consideration what would happen if they maintained an addictive behavior and the toll that it would take on their body, etc. So you have to be able to really analyze and really look to see, am I making the safe choices? Am I making the best choices? Or am I just assuming that somehow it's all going to take care of itself? We get a lot of that. In Santa Barbara, we have a lot of very right-brained people, very, very hopeful that it's all going to work out, and I don't have any evidence that that's a practical way to live or a safe way to live, or that it's going to pay off, because usually it's what a gambler would say. Well, hey, I've got my rent money, I got my mortgage money, and I just have a feeling about red 7, And then, of course, red 7 has a small chance of coming in, and then they're shocked that they've lost their rent or their mortgage money. Well, I hate to see people gambling with their lives, gambling with their future.
Thank you, Susan. Once again, a little reality check.
On a regular basis, right? Yes, please.
So therefore, are there actually stages of our lives during which our priorities actually change?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. You and I are very different from the people we were when we were in our 20s and 30s, even though we didn't know each other. We've talked about it. It's amazing to me how many people that I know are doing the same things that they always did. I don't quite understand it. Women and men who were running around in their 20s and 30s and 40s, who were running around in their 70s, it just seems so exhausting to me. And yet, that's the choice they make. And so, yes, you have different stages. You have a stage when you're young. It's all about education. It's all about building a career. Then it may be all about having a family and children. Then it's got to be about stabilizing your health and stabilizing your life and planning for the future. That has to come next.
Boy, that was a lot of information right there, and we have more to give you. Susan, I have another question. Are there any situations that cannot be improved by the 4 questions of inquiry?
None.
There you go. Perfectly put.
Just the truth.
How about telling us more about worry and how that affects every area of life, which, of course, you can call the crimping of the straw?
Well, if you ever try to have, a malt, and you're drinking it with a straw, and then you press your fingers here, and so now you're not going to be able to get anything to come through the straw. That's what worry does to you. If you crimp the straw physically, you see it doesn't work. You're not going to get any malted milk. If you allow yourself to get nervous, if you allow yourself to feel anxious, which is an extreme case of nervous, or panicky, which is an extreme case, then you're not going to be able to see opportunities. You're not going to be able to decide what to do about opportunities. You're not going to be able to move and take action in a way that people are going to interpret as skilled and successful and positive, and people are going to run from you. That's the other part of it. They're not going to be attracted to you. They're going to be quite the opposite. So allowing yourself to feel worried is just really a dangerous habit. Instead, do the 4 questions of inquiry. Bring yourself back to peace about whatever that story was.
I love that. It's so helpful. Now, how does pervasive sadness affect results and that I'll never story that so many people tell to themselves?
Well, sadness is almost as dangerous as anxiety. Not quite, and you can't afford to have it. Because look at your life and look at your goals, and if you're a proactive person, you've got plenty of goals, and as soon as you reach one goal, you open up to another goal. And then you reach that goal and you create another one or another 5. So everybody who's positive and upbeat and action-oriented and focused on the future is going to want more of the things they want and less or none of the things they don't want. And sadness is a huge, huge danger, just as anxiety is.
And an energy drainer.
Terrible.
Oh,
terrible.
Well, now, how about this question, Susan? How do you help people who believe that God wants them to suffer?
Again, look at the evidence that this is true. I don't have any evidence that this is true. And I really seriously question, because having been in that tunnel, having gone toward the light, and in the light it was all about unconditional love, love for all beings, not love for me versus you, not love for me versus the people in my life. It was love for all beings all the time. So I don't have any evidence, and haven't since then. That was 1975. I haven't had any evidence since then that God wanted one of us to be happy, but not all of us to be happy. And if you control your mind, if you eliminate sadness, if you eliminate anger, if you eliminate fear, I see every single one of my clients having great results, much, much better lives. So that would look to me as well as proof that the story about God wanting people to suffer it's just a fallacy. It's erroneous.
Absolutely. On the other side of that coin, count your blessings.
Yes.
Yes. I know, Susan, that you're a great supporter of developing the best brain chemistry and building the brain's ability to function. Would you speak to us about this?
Yeah, you bet. So people who are in fear, people who are living in anger, people who are living in sadness, this is biochemical. You don't have to live like this. You absolutely don't have to live like this. And for about 95% of the people I've worked with, they were able to get a radical transformation by taking natural supplements and learning these skills. It's not one or the other. The supplements aren't going to silence your mind. You have to silence your mind. However, these skills of silencing your mind sometimes need some support. Some of these supplements are quite remarkable. And also exercise. You know, if you do 2 hours of moderate exercise a day, that is considered to be as powerful as antidepressants, according to Dr. Daniel Amen. The Amen Clinic works with depressed people all the time. So that's an amazing, amazing thing. And I will say, since I started swimming regularly, joy is much more present with me on a daily basis. There's no question. What does that mean? It means I don't have to work to turn the stories around. There are very few stories. It's an improvement.
Oh, I love that. Keep that body in motion. Now, what about expectations? The things that we expect based on the old stories, why are they so dangerous?
Well, you have to be able to take action to produce results. You have to be able to be skilled enough to select the action to take and have the skills to implement that action plan effectively. So if I get up in the morning and I assume everybody's going to do everything perfectly and my life is going to be perfect and nothing much is required of me, that's fine, except what happens if one day it doesn't work out that way? Will I still have top-level skills? No. Will I still have the mastery of the ability to assess what to do when I need to do something? No. Will I have been up to date with my research to clarify what actions, skills, and tools are the most effective for me at this moment in my life? No. So that's why you can't be either a victim or just happily on cloud nine without some level of intelligence and action. It's just dangerous.
Now, how about explaining to us about the incredible power of wanting something different from what you have and how so many people misunderstand this and they mess it up with their goals?
Well, the secrets to goal reaching, we have like 5 minutes, so I think we should probably go into that.
That would be good.
Okay. So the secret to goal reaching is, again, to start with by day, month, year. So you have to start with the time frame within which this thing occurs. So if you start with he'll never, she'll never, I'll never, my boss will never, whatever, and you get to the turnaround, that you don't have any evidence that you can't get a better job, but now the next step would be to create a goal about it. So you might say by June 1st, 2019, if you're somebody who needs a job, I am offered a position with a company that pays $200,000 gross per annum, and then whatever the 3 or 4 things that you need, right? So that's your goal. You have to be able to stay in an emotional state that allows that to flow to you. You can't be, it's impossible, what was I thinking? And then, if somebody calls you in spite of all that negativity and they want to give you an interview, you don't do anything to prepare for it. You don't have the right clothes or don't buy a new suit to go to the job interview. You don't have your hair done if you're a woman. You don't have a haircut if you're a man. All this stuff that is basically shooting yourself in the foot is a problem for people who don't allow themselves to stay in a positive enough energetic state to deserve the job, to be a match for the job. So you've got to be a match for whatever it is. I mean, you see Gigi and I, we always have our nails done, we always have our hair done, our clothes always look good, we've got the right cosmetics on, we put time and effort into preparing ourselves for you guys. We write the questions, we practice the script, she asks the questions, I know the answers. It doesn't just happen by wizardry. So, it's easy enough to do it if you have a system as I do, and Gigi does, and you just keep doing it, and week after week, year after year, it gets easier. That's life. That's exactly how life operates. And if you're one of those people who just shows up like it's a come-as-you-are party, unless the way you are is magnificent, unless you basically roll out of bed, and you look like a movie star, for the rest of us, it requires a lot of effort and a lot of preparation and a lot of planning. So it all depends what your goal is. And I honestly believe that people who have to do a lot of preparation are luckier because we seem to have more results because we're expecting that we're going to have a lot of effort that we have to put into it, rather than people where everything comes easy to them and they just wake up and show up and it's a simple thing. I've seen a lot of people like that crash and burn. I mean, really, really crash and burn. So let's avoid now. We still have 2 minutes. So do you want me to keep going or do you want to ask a different question?
Well, I'm thinking how important the focus and the determination factors play in all of this.
Yes, it's everything. Because you can start out, it's like the tortoise and the hare. So you can start out. It's really important to understand that with focus and determination and consistent action, you can have a fabulous, fabulous result. Without focus, determination, and consistent action, it is virtually impossible for anyone to have a fabulous result about anything. I mean, first of all, if you're someone who is a pilot or the captain of a ship or even someone in a rowboat or crew, you're not going to end up at your destination. You're going to be wherever you're going to be, right? So it's essential to stay very, very, very focused on your trip, no matter what method of transportation you're using. If it's a relationship, you're not going to end up in that committed relationship because you're going to get distracted and you're going to go elsewhere. Now, that's not saying stay in it forever no matter how awful it is. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you have the skills and you found the right relationship, then you want to be focused, determined, and consistent so that it is a great relationship and stays great. So it's really important to understand that focus, which is an upper left brain skill, and then consistent action and determination, those are lower left brain skills. Those are huge. Thank you, Fred. And that you have to make sure your emotions, the lower right brain, are joyous, excited, happy, hopeful, all of those positive emotions. And then, of course, you've got to start with the upper right brain or the upper left brain. You've got to start either with the data, the dollars, the numbers of the blue quadrant. That's what I'm looking for. That's my goal. That's where I'm going. Or you have to start with the upper right brain. It's the vision.
Thank you, Susan. This was very helpful and a great reminder to refresh my mind on the facts here. Now, so with everybody, if you really want to be peaceful, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, is that a song? Well, and who doesn't? Then please learn these 4 questions of inquiry, and you can use it every day, any situation, as Susan has explained and shared. And for those who are looking forward for answers and don't want to use the dangerous option of trial and error, please accept this generous offer that Susan puts up all the time, every day. The availability, 1 hour of a complimentary telephone session. Wow, that's really cool. So just something that you can do. And thank you, Susan, for the gift of helping people to be their best selves.